All right, let's move on to today's unpopular opinion.
Unpopular opinion.
Oh, don't we love to complain about younger generations? Oh, they're so lazy. They're so entitled. They've got no social skills. They don't work hard. Oh my God, these younger generations. Is it just me? Or have I heard and read that for the last 200 years? How can it be that every younger generation is the same? Is it true that Gen Z is different from Gen X and from Millennials? Or is it much more about, well, look, when we're younger, we act and think in a certain way. And when we're older, we act and think in another way. Or is it socio-economic? You know, the fact that when baby boomers were children, they had a future mapped out for them. You go to university, you get higher education, you get a great job, you can buy a house. And things for younger people are just very, very different nowadays. Let's have a look at this thought. Today's unpopular opinion is there are no personality differences between generations. No hay diferencias de personalidad entre generaciones. How do you think people voted on Instagram, Dan?
False.
They did say false. They did. 77%. What do you think about this?
Well, I think that, we're not the same as the other generations, but everyone complains about the next generation. So.
As a Gen Xer, I know I've changed over time. And that's got nothing to do with a generational thing. That's because es ser humano, right? When I was younger, I was a little more disrespectful. I was a little more concerned with going out, meeting girls, instead of going to work and working hard. You know, is it not a question of age rather than generations? Well, let's dig into it, shall we? There are no personality differences between generations. So in the pro column, agreeing that there are no personality differences. Personality is individual, not generational. Personality traits are shaped by individual experiences, upbringing, and environment, rather than the year someone was born. People within the same generation can have wildly different personalities, making generational stereotypes misleading and oversimplified. It's true, however, whole generations faced different challenges, shaping them culturally differently. Like the generations who were born during or before the Second World War had a very different mindset when it came to conflict resolution, work ethic, than those of us who were born outside of a war-torn time. My generation, Generation X, for example, we weren't born through any great conflict. So we have a very different view on conflict resolution, on rebellion. And those are real generational differences that persist through time. So perhaps there is some truth to this, just to play devil's advocate. Generational labels are just marketing gimmicks. The idea of distinct generational personalities is often used in marketing and media to sell products, books, and lifestyle trends. These labels are exaggerated for commercial purposes rather than based on meaningful psychological differences. Yeah, clickbait articles. Generation Z are doing this now. You won't believe it. Click here. Number 3 will surprise you. Just all that crap that BuzzFeed just shovels out. Historical trends repeat themselves. Complaints about younger generations being lazy, rebellious, or entitled have existed for centuries. Older generations have always viewed younger ones as different, but over time, people tend to adopt similar behaviors as they age and take on responsibilities. Okay, let's move on to the con arguments now. 77% of you may agree with these points. Cultural and technological shifts shape personality. Each generation grows up with different societal norms, values, and technologies, shaping their personality in distinct ways. For example, Gen Z is more accustomed to digital communication, while other generations may be more comfortable with face-to-face interactions. It's true. Maybe it would be fair to say that Gen Z communicate or more habitually communicate online rather than face-to-face because of the burgeoning messaging technology that was around at the time. It's true. But surely communication in its very essence is the same. I wouldn't say Generation Z are any more socially inept than we were at the age of 20. Economic and social conditions influence outlooks. Generations that grew up during economic recessions, wars, or technological booms develop different perspectives on work, security, and success. For example, baby boomers experienced post-war economic growth, while millennials dealt with financial crises and student debt, leading to different attitudes about careers and stability. It's, again, another fact. I mean, we brought that up earlier when I was playing devil's advocate. The third point here, different approaches to authority and institutions. Older generations tend to have more trust in institutions like government, corporations, and organized religion, while younger generations often express skepticism or demand reform. This reflects changing cultural attitudes over time. And I think we'll leave off with this point. Shifts in communication styles. Digital natives, Gen Zs and Millennials, often prefer texting and social media for communication, while older generation value phone calls or in-person interactions. These communication habits affect how they relate to the world and each other. Is it true that Gen Z will always be lazy? Is it true that Gen X are always going to be rebellious, that millennials are more sensitive? Or is that just a myth? Are we just seeing time play out for human beings as it always has? Vero says, false. There are always differences between generations because of the ways of thinking. Each one evolves and varies as years go by. Carmen says, culture moves and shapes us, our behavior and desires, and culture is changing day by day. Earn Warrior. I'm glad to be a generation who hasn't had a war to suffer so far. Yeah, me too. Touch wood. It won't happen in our lifetime, eh? False, although there are always exceptions. Each generation has its own peculiarities. Yeah, I would agree with that, I think. Wow, Lord Pumpkins. I'm going to try and abbreviate this because there's a lot here. False. Personality of each human is developed based on events, environments they had when they grew up. To say a generation is the same as the old one is to say they had the same environment and events in their life that previous generations had, which is not true. A book, Psychology of Money, says that the precipitation of money is different from person to person and is dependent on the environment and events that occurred during their growth. You went to a serf in feudal times, they would be like, wow, you are so lazy. Why? Because the environment did shape that generation differently, the cultural norms, etc. However, isn't it impossible not to see the same things repeated time and time again? I remember my grandfather, my God. Always with your headphones on, always listening to music. The music is terrible. I can't understand what they're saying. You're so lazy. Your generation is lazy. Disrespectful. We hear the same. And then I'm hearing the same thing my generation saying about Gen Zs. And for sure, millennials will say it about, the generation Alpha. I hear the same complaints time and time again, so there has to be a little kernel of truth in our similarities, right? Let's go to our friends on Instagram. Again, I got a lot of messages with regards to this one, so I'm sorry if I don't read yours out in particular. I believe it's true. I don't think the differences between generations have to do with personality. I think it has more to do with the way they see and approach life. That's Nessa Vanessa. Canons are repeated. This is from Thelia. I think the canons are repeated, but the age has different life situations and makes us all seem different. Very astute observation from Celia there. Jordan, yeah, I agree. Generational differences are overhyped. People are shaped by their upbringing, culture, and personal experiences rather than by what year they were born. My argument to that, Jordan, would be every year we see culture adapting and changing. So as culture adapts and changes, therefore so do we, and we were brought up differently by different generations, right? Like my grandfather, I was raised by my grandparents, okay? And I was basically left wild. The door was open on the street. I came back home when it got dark, No helicopter parenting, no one kind of over my shoulder checking that I'm not seeing and doing anything naughty. I lived and was raised very much on the street, as many of my friends and people in my generation were. Don't screw with Generation X, is what I'm saying. We know 1,000 ways to remove a blood stain. Yeah, so culturally speaking, yeah, every culture sees its differences and that shapes us, making each generation different, no? Mia says, I don't know, I think every generation has its own vibe. The way Gen Z thinks about work is way different from how boomers see it. True. And that's a socioeconomic trend, right? The post-war boom that boomers had doesn't exist for Gen Z. There is no guarantees for these kids to go out and find a great job and to buy a house nowadays. Seriously? I mean, come on. I can't even buy a house on Generation X. I would love to. Can't. Raphael, first-time writer. There's some truth to both sides. People have always said kids these days act differently. True. Hard to argue that. You hear the same patterns repeating over and over again. All right, we'll leave it there because we've done a lot of comments there. Let's get to the results, shall we? Okay, so I made the statement, there are no personality differences between generations. And you guys said... 78% false. I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me, Dan. I don't know about to you. I mean, look, the truth here is that there is a shade of grey, isn't there? I mean, it's true. There are so many things that have impacted us culturally, that have changed us and shaped us differently. Like when I was in my formative years, the internet didn't exist. I didn't get an email account until I was 21 and I started university. The idea of having an email account was so alien to me. Cultural impacts have happened that have led each generation to have their own unique flavor, but God, aren't the complaints so damn similar? It can't be that every generation is lazier, has worse taste in music, is more disrespectful, more ignorant, more entitled than the last. Can it? So I would say there's a little bit of both in this. But you know what Grandpa Bo would say about that, right? He would say, Rob, that's just your opinion, and opinions, they're like buttholes. Everyone has one. They all stink, including yours. Let's move on to today's 100 Humans.